my apologies to folks who may have had a problem with the link to register in the e-alert. Obviously, everyone here figured that out. And I'm not sure what happened, but it happened. Okay, I have posted in the chat, and perhaps in a little while, Ellen Thomas, if it's convenient for you, you can post it again. I just wanted to read what I posted to introduce the call to folks. This call may become an ongoing series. In it, we seek to highlight and spread the excellent content created by the WILPF US section in the eNews. The call provides a platform for authors to share insights into their eNews stories, fostering greater membership engagement and collaboration within WILPF. Members are encouraged to take this opportunity to connect in a more personal setting, a more casual and personal setting, building stronger relationships and interconnecting efforts. Participation in these calls is voluntary for authors, yet they are invited and encouraged to attend to give more depth and attention to the pieces they've written. The topics we discuss on the call will be fluid and driven by member interest, reflecting the issues most relevant to participants on the call. This is a chance for collective engagement, fostering a dynamic and supportive environment that adapts to the interests of the members. And I will be inviting Michael Ippolito later to talk to us about posting eNews stories to social media. So that's something you can look forward to. For starters, I'd like to call on people who had stories in the last eNews to, and if I missed you, please forgive me. I can't say I've memorized all of the authors, but I do want to introduce the authors who are present. So I'll call on you, and you can just tell us what your story title was. You'll have a chance to say more about your stories later, but I want people to be aware of who the authors are. So we have Ellen Thomas.
Actually, it was Ellen Barfield's story. And I don't know what the title was. What was it, Ellen? You're muted.
Ellen Barfield, please unmute. We can't hear a word you say.
Thank you. I'm sorry. It's very easy to do that. Don't be so impatient. I was muted because I hadn't been called on. I don't know the title. I just scrolled down rapidly and tried to find it, but didn't. But it's pretty far down the list. And it starts with a group of about 35 of us in a photograph. So that it's fairly easy to find. It's about being in Atlanta, Georgia for the Alliance for Nuclear Accountability's meeting. And
okay.
More about that later.
Exactly. By the way, I want to make sure that everyone acknowledges Michael Ippolito, who's on this call. It was his suggestion that we go ahead and try something like this as a way to bring more attention to the eNews.
A good one.
And we aren't, I'm trying to introduce the authors. I think we won't try to talk about their stories because you are going to have more time later in the call to talk about your stories. So authors of stories, you will have 1 to 2 minutes to talk about your stories later in the agenda. But other authors include Grace Aaron from the Los Angeles branch, Tina Shelton, and you can wave when you hear your name called, Tina Shelton from the Philadelphia branch, Mary Beth Gardam, who did a story for Women, Money, and Democracy, Eileen Krakowski. I'm trying to remember what your story was about, but you had a story for Boston, as I recall. Jan Korterman, there was part of the Middle East Peace and Justice Action Committee story. Lenny Villagomez-Reeves, do you want to wave at us, Lenny? Talking about the Cuba situation. Pam Albright, you co-wrote a story, I believe, or no, you wrote the story, I believe, for domestic prisoners.
She co-wrote it with me in the Philadelphia branch. She's not feeling well tonight, so she might stay off camera.
Yeah, I just did a little bit of editing.
Oh, there you are.
Okay,
yeah.
we consider editors and proofreaders as co-writers.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Diane Blay wrote a story about the Jane Addams branch. And Diane, you could wave if you've vanished from my screen, but you were there. And Nancy Price had an article on Earth democracy issues. And I'm trying to see if I spot other authors. Is there anyone I've left out who's here now? Okay, so
Darian, I have a question about this. I printed out the first pages without the read more sections. I don't see the authors' names like I had remembered seeing them in the past in the eNews. Sorry, but since we're talking about the authors, I figured I'd ask it now.
Sure. The names appear when you click on the story itself on the read more, then you'll see the names and everything about them.
Thank you.
And actually, that brings up a question that I want people to think about, but to answer later when we get to discussion. It's always a question of how much we should list in the email that goes out. And would people want to see the names of the authors along with the story titles to inform their considerations when they click on the read more? And looks like one person would like to see the names of the authors. So I'll lay out what we're going to be undertaking today. Shortly, we'll be joined by Nancy Price, who's going to give us some ideas on how to make eNews more effective. Then we will turn to the announcements in the eNews. And if you're someone who wrote an announcement, you'll have a maximum of a minute to just talk about additional information or other relevant or time-sensitive aspects of your announcement. Next, we'll go to the authors, where for each story, there will be a maximum of 2 minutes to share insights on your story, other kinds of follow-up or things you think would be valuable to add for this audience. And that way people can better connect with what you're doing and who to contact for more information. Following that, we're going to hear, we'll have a chance for question and answer for about 15 to 20 minutes. And then Michael Ippolito will be talking about using the eNews in social media and some of the capacities of the new website that isn't there yet, but will be there. So that will be a lot of good information so that people who write articles, especially issue committees, can publicize their articles and topics through social media. Then we'll have more casual discussion time at the end of the call. So before we get fully started, are there any questions right now from people? Thank you, Robin, for your affirmation. And thank you, Michael, for your idea on this story, on this webinar, this event, and your work on it.
His hand is raised.
Oh, Michael, your raised hand blended in with your background very effectively. Thank you. So go ahead, Michael.
Thank you. First, thank you everybody for being here. And I just wanted to also share in the idea of this too, in addition to trying to give a spotlight more to the great content people are creating and let us know more and synergize efforts and collaborate and things like that. Kind of an homage to the old Twitter storms we used to do. I know we may not do it on this call, but if this is something that people would like to do on a regular basis, the hope would be that while we're on the call in a more casual environment, talking with authors, building relationship, learning about stories and content and all these various things, there can be folks who are collectively sharing while on the call, like we used to do on the Twitter storms throughout the call series. So this call is a way to connect and bring a spotlight, but it's also a time for people to collectively share out on social media our wonderful content. So that would be a hope. And as we move to that, without going into too much detail, things like hashtags that authors could prepare and little like introductory posts for social media are all things we can talk about in time and have situated. So that way you can have posts ready for the author's articles, so they can even put them in the chat. And while people are talking about that, just like we did with the Twitter storms, we can be collectively sharing our content and magnifying and amplifying like WILPF's voice, our messaging across social media. So thank you so much. And again, thank you all for being here. Happy New Year and many good things for peace and freedom in 2025 amidst a wild time. So blessings.
Great, thank you. Yes. And we expect to have further information probably in the next eNews about how authors might consider what hashtags to use and so forth. Now, I saw Nancy Price here last time I looked, but now she's gone. So I will, you're there. Thank you, Nancy. So Nancy, are you ready to tell us about how to make more effective use of the eNews? But please unmute.
Thank you. Well, I don't think I'm really much of an authority on that topic, but I can emphasize what I tried to do for Earth Democracy and what we covered, the topics we covered in Earth Democracy. In particular, as co-chair of Earth Democracy, I had a pretty good feeling from the people who were in our sort of core committee, what was going on in some some branches. And so I would engage with those folks to write an article so that there were more representative stories and different voices of people writing instead of, I often was doing the eNews pieces. And that really helped because it featured what some of our branches were doing that was very important, and some of them would link up, some of the stories would link up, and it would give us a larger scope of what kind of work that we were accomplishing. Then second, I think it's important to, and I'm sure all of you might agree, to reference back to previous articles if you can bring forward the topic so that you're enhancing or enlarging or continuing the discussion of whatever topic it was that you wrote about previously. And that links, of course, to campaigns and projects that the committee is working on. Then thirdly, I think that it's really important, and we're learning more from Gloria, for example, and Kim Poole, that really having good illustrations is important. Pictures, maps, charts that not only liven up the text and the presentation, but we can begin to feature, our artists in WILPF. How about cartoons? How about poetry? How about How about doing a crossword puzzle? Anyway, I think there's just lots of creative ways that we can pull people in and expand the interest in what we're doing and saying. And then I would like to emphasize in particular that we can use the eNews to alert people to upcoming events and special days. And for example, rather than alerting people to World Water Day, which is March 22nd, in the March eNews, get that out in the February eNews. Help people begin to plan, to talk with others in their branch or members among members if they don't have a branch yet established where they live. To lots of these, for example, World Water Day or Earth Day, which is April 22nd, can be very successful if there's considerable planning done ahead of time. And also that gives a chance to reach out to local allies, to local other groups, and put on something that's pretty interesting and pretty spectacular. Gives you a chance to invite speakers, to arrange, maybe if you need to go to one of your representatives' office and either congratulate them on some policy stand they're taking or challenge their positions. And finally, I think that we could engage with other issue committees and have joint articles that bring together topics that we're both working on from different angles, so that there is some kind of cross-fertilization, some linkage, some synergies built that way. So anyway, that's what I've been thinking about when I was asked to sort of open this up, and hope that we can have more discussion about it. Thank you very much. Oh, and I have one more.
Thank you.
I have one more comment, and that is, I think it's very important to have an action attached to your article. I tried to do that with I've often done that, but for example, this eNews I did with reporting on COP29, the UN climate meetings, and linking that to the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty that Earth Democracy is going to work on. And so that hopefully giving the background and then having an action
And
are linked. And
suddenly we lost your volume.
excuse me, you've lost my volume.
No, Darian, it's you.
It's
Yeah.
me, my apologies.
Yeah, so that we can, where was I? I'm not quite sure where I was. Yeah, so we link what we're providing as background or some sort of immediate issue or concern with an action we'll take, either a positive one or maybe a negative one in opposition. I think that's very important. I looked over what I did write with Cindy Peister for this eNews, and I see ways that I could have improved the text. I see ways that perhaps I could have put the action first, catch people's attention, catch the reader's attention, and then put the background on what happened at COP29 in the second part. So there are ways to really work on presentation, which I think are important. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, Nancy. And you mentioned poetry. That reminded me to introduce also David Rothhauser, who was a co-author with Eileen of the article from the Boston branch. So glad you could make it, David.
Yes, I think I've lost the whole image, and I don't know if you can hear me
We can hear
or
you.
not. No, you can hear me. Good. You don't need to see me.
I just was going to say, I wanted to get back to Nancy and see if people had questions for her, and there will be an opportunity for you as a co-author to speak.
Oh, sure. Okay, great.
And we
That will
can
give me a
see
chance
you
to get
too.
back
We
into
can
the-
see you, David.
Pardon?
We can
We-
see you. We can see you.
Okay, but I can't see me. I can't see anyone. But I'm trying to get back to where, oh yeah, there we are. Okay, here we are. Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did anyone want to ask Nancy a question or elaborate on what Nancy said? And I will mention that when Nancy, and I see your hand, Eileen, when Nancy mentioned you can refer to prior eNews stories, that of course means that you can link in your story to those prior stories. And you can also do that in e-alerts, which is an important way to make e-alerts shorter, but still make reference to the background information you want to include. Eileen, go right ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. You brought up a lot of good points. I was wondering about the illustrations. I'm preparing a flyer for an event coming up on February 8th and I had to be really careful about what I chose. I don't want our branch or WILPF to get sued. How are you approaching the illustrations? Are you trying to get original, or are you using parts of an illustration? Are you asking for permission? How are you going about when you suggest this? What do you think is a safe way to proceed to get a good image? Yeah, you're still muted.
Frankly,
Yeah.
Well, frankly, in the earlier days, I was using Shutterstock, and of course that, that was fair use. But lately, I've just had pictures from that people have supplied to me, or in their eNews article. For example, Lib Hutchby from North Carolina just would send me pictures or of meetings or standing out on a street corner with signs or marching.
Okay.
Things of that
That's
sort.
safe.
So,
okay.
But I do want to emphasize here that in another situation, the Alliance for Democracy that I work with, we were sued a considerable amount of money by one of these fire chasers, and we had to hire a lawyer to negotiate down the amount of money that we were being sued for by the AP, Associated Press, and by Reuters. And there was no way we could get those two media groups to negotiate with us. Ultimately, we had a settlement, but it wasn't inexpensive. So it's very important these days to pay attention to that.
And I just want to clarify, WILPF US has a contract with Shutterstock so that we can use their images and we pay to use them. It is not a fair use situation. It is a contract that we pay for. And there are a limited number of situations where we might be able to use a picture that someone has online, but generally, we really like it when people are able to provide their own photographs. And if you don't have an image that's appropriate for your story, given the trouble we've had with people misunderstanding what is copyrighted and what isn't, we'd rather prefer that people just submit the story without an image, and we ask the eNews editor to find an appropriate image from Shutterstock or some other source that we know is safe, because we've continued to have difficulties with people submitting images that they got somewhere thinking that it was somehow okay to use it when it wasn't. If you have a question, you're always welcome to ask and get further information.
Just as a follow-up, I did get permission, but evidently it wasn't necessary to use a YouTube webinar that the American New England Indigenous group has put together on the bills, the Indigenous bills going on in Massachusetts. I asked if that was okay to use, but I'm also using one of their pictures. I didn't ask about the picture, just the webinar. does that kind, if it's posted on a website, is that picture okay to use?
No.
Okay, I see you shaking your head vigorously. Got it. Thank you.
Websites are copyrighted in most cases.
Got it.
You can scroll to the bottom of the website, and sometimes you'll see the copyright information, or you might find it under About, but it's because of these complexities that we're pretty much asking people, if you have a photograph with permission from the photographer for us to use the photo, and it's a WILPF photo, I'm not talking about an AP photo, then we can go forward with it. And Michael has had some experience with this. We're low on time, but Michael, can you make a brief comment?
Could I just add, I think writing up guidelines would be very important.
It's too difficult, frankly. We've tried writing up guidelines and folks don't quite get it because it's very complex. So we will be providing guidelines that basically say, if you don't have your own original photo or other original illustration, check with us in advance if you have a notion about something you want to use. But Michael, you'll elaborate.
Yeah, so I've had the privilege of being the eNews editor for the last 3 months, and I was able to secure 2 edit licenses from pitchers. And I going down that process and learning a lot about editorial. It is very complicated. It's not easy to understand really clearly. Just to say that you don't always have to pay for images, but sometimes you do. And so, for example, the disarm image wasn't available on the site that they suggested in the United States or Canada, but I was able to find the historical archive. At the historical archive, Granger, they have tons of images, and it costs usually $50 to license it for the eNews. So you can, if you wanted that image, you could go and you could, seek that out and pay for it. But for example, for the Middle East committee, it was a very important image for the story. Sadly, due to something else, we have secured the positive image, the Pope with the Jesus with the Palestinian scarf there, that will be included. But that image was from Democracy Now! So there's a way you can do a search where you search for different licenses, and you have to hunt down and contact those organizations. Now, if you do that legwork, it's great. But at the same time, like Democracy Now!, when I reached out and contacted them, any image on Democracy Now! We can use. But they just want us to reach out, explain how we're going to use it and so forth. It really probably should be one person that is the conduit to the folks at Democracy Now! In the office for that, just to kind of help streamline communication flow, not to bottleneck anything. Glad to write up how to do that for folks if they want to know. But just for an example, Democracy Now! Is in charge. So there is a whole bunch of subtlety and nuance to that. And but yeah, you can't just grab a photo unless it's clearly marked as Creative Commons, which you can actually search specifically for that. But I know we're eager to hear all the authors talk about their pieces, and we can talk about the subtlety and nuance to getting the photographs. But with the new website, photographs are really important. That's for the #1 thing that drives interaction for your pieces on social media, is the image you have. So it's not a throwaway conversation or a subtlety, or it's really important to have impactful, powerful images. And if we can utilize and credit images from Democracy Now!, or if people want, I paid out of pocket for Disarm to have the license for their photo this month, because I just did it for them. But and people can do that as well if they'd like. It's usually around $50 to use it once. But anyway, thank you, and I yield.
Thank you, Michael. And I will say that while $50 isn't terrible, it's about 5 times what we pay for the Shutterstock images. So that would be something, if people really want an image and they make arrangements to get it, that would probably need to come from the issue committee budget because it's not in the eNews budget. And we are an organization that has to deal with economic realities.
I'm just saying if people want to reach in their pocket too, you know what I'm saying? If it's an author, like if I want to write, if someone wants to write something, they really want an image, you go grab that image, you know what I'm saying? Like that's what I did for the disarm. I mean, I'm not independently wealthy, you know, like, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you. So our next stop on the way here is to invite the authors of eNews announcements to talk about them. And I'm looking at the announcements and I don't actually see authors from the announcements other than Diane was here and she, I don't think Diane did announcements. I was the one who did announcements about the upcoming Jane Addams branch meetings, and those come on a regular basis and people should be familiar with them by now. I will very briefly talk about some of the other announcements I did, and then I'll invite other people who wrote announcements to talk about them. One thing for people to know about is that we are still looking for volunteers who have some background in mediation, conflict resolution, some kind of conflict resolution, dispute settlement techniques, people with that kind of background who would be interested in being peace seekers for WILPF US. And you can contact me for further information on that. Gloria, do you have a question or can I come back to you after I'm done? Looks like I'll come back to Gloria. So that's the peace seekers. Additionally, we're looking for people who want to help with the peace-seeking process, who don't necessarily have background in mediation, but who would help with the administration, because they're just simple and basic things. It's not likely to be a big demand, but people can contact me for further information on that. And then the other announcement I want to really emphasize is the WILPF Collaboration Initiative. This is an opportunity for branches that have a special area of interest in their community to be brought up to the national level of attention by collaborating with the president to write an essay or an article about their project and submit that to the president, and then it becomes something that we announce to everyone through our e-alert process. It wouldn't be an alert. It ends up getting a web page on our website. So this is an interesting and exciting way to take advantage of the national tools we have to promote branch focuses. So I hope people will think about that. And another announcement, we had a lot of national announcements. We are still looking for an alternate for our International Advisory Board member. So this can be especially interesting for people who have an interest in WILPF International. There are 2 International Advisory Board meetings per year, and this would be a way to become involved with those meetings. So I'll put my email address, president@wilpfus.org, in the chat. And I hope you will think about these announcements and contact me if you'd like further information. As I said, I don't see other people who wrote announcements present at this meeting, so I will go ahead and continue on. And Michael, you have your hand up again, something really brief.
Would you like me to be timekeeper so we can like have all the authors start going through 2 minutes to present each story so we can start rolling? I'm sure authors are very eager to share about their story, and some people might be leaving at the top of the hour. So if we want to hear from the authors, I know we don't have a bell like on Maestro, but I don't know if someone else wants to be a timekeeper, but for people to give the 2-minute presentations. But
if you would be willing to be a timekeeper, that would be great. And you can say ding when time is up. Make a
I will
time.
ding people.
Okay.
You know, a ding
So
noise.
Gloria asked in the chat what authors. We're talking about the authors of the eNews articles in the last eNews. And Gloria, you're sort of an honorary author because I know you worked with the woman whose name I can't recall in Canada who wrote the Ice Queen article. So we'll call on you when we get to that. You can write Tamara Lawrence. Thank you. So go ahead and keep working to unmute, but it looks like you're unmuted now, so we'll have a chance to call on you eventually. So I'm going to go ahead and turn to the eNews and call on people in the order that their articles appear in the eNews. And the first article in the eNews was from Cheryl, and she's in Europe right now and not able to be here. And the second article in the eNews was from Jan Quarterman, the Middle East Committee, and Jan had to leave early, so unfortunately she isn't here to talk about her article. And that brings us to Cuban resilience despite hurricanes and US blockade. So Lenny, if you would like to take 2 minutes to talk about your article.
Oh, I'm going to go for 1 minute. That'll be great. So
Thank you.
I'm going to point out that this is an article about a fairly trivial personal experience for me, but a major hurricane. Cuba had 2 back-to-back hurricanes, one in the eastern part of the country, one in the west, in October, November. Everyone was saved because Cuba actually evacs houses and feeds people in danger. And Cuba sets an example that would be really great for the US to follow. They make the social commitment, the commitment to human life and well-being, the first priority of the country. Because this example is a really dangerous one for racial colonial capitalism. The US, instead of emulating this, it tries to eliminate revolutionary Cuba. So now, after the hurricane, there was a lot of destruction of agriculture. That means there's actual food shortage, but the US continues the campaign to try to deprive Cuba of any income. So start here, call the Biden administration, tell them to take Cuba off the US list of state sponsors of terrorism, an absurd designation. Thank you. I took
Wonderful.
the vote.
Good role model. Thank you, Lenny. And Gloria, you're going to be next, and I owe you an apology. Somehow, when I looked at the Snow Queen article and saw Tamara's name there, I thought she had somehow written the article, but you wrote the article. So you have up to 2 minutes to tell us extra tidbits about that article that we might be interested in.
I don't know if you can see me. Yeah, can you see me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, because I don't see myself. I guess I'm down the row somewhere. Okay, well, that doesn't matter one way or the other. Well, I want to wish you all, hopefully, a peaceful Orthodox Christmas, because today is Orthodox Christmas. And that certainly fits in with Tamara's trip to St. Petersburg. I almost said Russia. And also, I was posting to the Disarm about this whole problem of, although you could say that these are, quote, Caucasian people and Christians, we don't know as much about them as many other global religions. And I think that needs to stop. So, because Jane Addams certainly was thrust into the middle of Eastern Europeans who were often Orthodox. And that makes a difference. They're real people. You live with them every day. And so that's why I was especially motivated to get involved with Tamara, or Tamara, I'm not sure how she pronounces it, because this was actually repeating Jane Addams' trip to visit Count Leo Tolstoy around 1895. I think she went to see him, and he immediately told her dress was disgusting because 5 peasants could wear a dress from that much material. So
Oh my.
this goes way back. This has nothing to do, folks, with the Cold War. We are so misreading the world. If everything begins and ends with, you know, a very limited thing. So if you would listen to Jane Adams and her connections, then Tamara connects to that. And the Cold War is only one little increment along that spiral of what went from centuries ago. And I even gave a link to the Orthodox Midnight Mass to anybody who wants it. I sent this big long post to Disarm. Just put your address in chat and I'll share it with you. It's very important. So maybe I'm timed out.
Yep. But thank you. Great. And
you're welcome.
Diane, you are next. So I'm glad that we see that you're with us.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I really enjoyed reading about Tolstoy and the trip that Jane Addams made to Russia. But anyway, so that was great, Gloria.
Thank you.
So my article that I had in the eNews dealt with the Jane Addams branch, which I am convener of. And basically it talked about how we meet on the third Wednesday of every month. And the next speakers for January and February. January is going to be the it's several people talking about this tribunal that they're going to be starting. And in February, we're going to have Karen Little from Chicago, who has art projects. So anyway, and basically I just talked about why Jane Addams, the virtual branch exists, because for anyone who doesn't have a local branch that you can easily access, we have the Jane Addams branch. It's virtual for anyone who can't make a local branch for some reason. So that was basically all my article dealt with. Thank you.
And by the way, everyone, there will be a chance to ask questions of the authors once all the authors have had a chance to speak and we've heard from them. So I understand now why Ellen Barfield couldn't name her article for us, the article she wrote with input from Ellen Thomas. The article was From Savannah River to DC, WILPF in Action with the ANA Against Nuclear Threats and Greenwashing. And Ellen Barfield, I think since you're the main author, you probably get most of the 2 minutes, but maybe you can leave half a minute for Ellen Thomas.
I don't need any.
Okay, I did post the title. I just couldn't find it in the rush of trying to, that's all. And it's kind of a long title, but the reason it doesn't say Atlanta, which is where the meeting was, is because we were primarily focused on the Savannah River nuclear weapons plant. But the Alliance for Nuclear Accountability is a nearly 40-year-old organization initially made up of the neighbors of the nuclear weapons facilities around the country. It's broader now, which it includes WILPF, which is not that. So you can see it's broader, but that was the start. And I lived in an intentional community which was challenging the Pantex nuclear weapons plant outside Amarillo, Texas, where back then and still they do the final assembly of every warhead in the US arsenal and disassembly when treaties call for that, and that's good. But of course, I won't go into that, but I could. But Alliance for Nuclear Accountability is roaring along with wonderful local people who have extreme info about the dangers of nuclear weapons plants and nuclear weapons, and aligning with wonderful people like WILPF to challenge nuclear weapons more. And we were able to tour the Savannah River site and get fed a line by a former broadcast journalist who had been well trained to talk about how safe and under budget everything they do there is. Oh yeah, right. And we were fairly challenging, but not rude to him. But I think he knew who his audience was. It was kind of fun. And Ellen took some wonderful footage of some of the other people in ANA who have tremendous knowledge, and Ellen recorded them. So I strongly urge you to check on her links. And the action item is that ANA has the best by far lobby event in DC most years, other than COVID recently. It will be in May this coming year. It's called DC Days. And I've already talked with Tara Vasafi with the thank you, Michael, the DC, Maryland, Virginia chapter about getting locals to DC Days, but I hope others of you can come too. Check.
Thank you, Ellen. And our next article was from the Philly branch, Fridays at Fetterman's, standing for ceasefire and peace in Philadelphia. It was co-written by Pam Albright and Tina Shelton, and at Pam's request, she's not feeling so great. Tina, you get to tell us about this.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to start by following up on Diane's announcement about the tribunal coming up, International People's Tribunal, to hold the U.S. accountable for dropping A-bombs. This is going to be happening later this year. The Korean atomic bomb victims are the plaintiffs, and
It's next year.
I think in New York.
26.
26?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Say it, Ellen.
2026.
It's in
next year.
2026.
Yes, 2026. Thank you. Clarifying. Yes, I said it wrong. Thank you for clarifying. The article was written about the culmination of a consistent presence in front of our senator's office. Earlier last year, four WILPF members were involved with nonviolent civil disobedience actions, including Sylvia Metzler was arrested in Senator Fetterman's office. And I was a support person, as well as there were two other support people. And next they are considering a tribunal so I might be hopefully reaching out to the Middle East Committee and see who we might help to recruit for a tribunal, a people's tribunal. I don't know, it's just an idea. They're being very creative about trying to hold the pressure. Obviously, pressure is not just on Fetterman, also on our newly elected senator. But that's it.
Good job. Right on time.
Fantastic. The next article was not really an article. It was Memo to President-elect Trump regarding détente in Europe. It came from the Disarm Committee, and particularly from a subcommittee within Disarm that worked on producing that article. I don't know if Diane Blay or Ellen Thomas, one of you wants to say anything about this, because I don't see anyone from that committee present.
I was also one of the editors of that document.
Okay, Gloria, I know you were on that committee. I had forgotten. Do you want to say something briefly about the memo?
Well, we spent a lot of time on proofreading it, and I think we got it really fine-tuned. And then it seemed like we didn't have a plan for audience. But then people stepped in, and I think this is an ongoing pattern that probably other people wouldn't talk about it the way I am, but my emphasis is always on where's it going and who's the audience. So they did rally around it, and we got a pretty good array of different people. And even Ellen Mass knew somebody in DC who's in the diplomatic area, and she was carrying hard copies to the embassies in person. And that was really good.
Fantastic. Yes, I was able to.
You know, in addition to the two presidents, the new other officials, I tracked down a couple of the undersecretary level type people. And it also could go to Tucker Carlson. They thought I was joking, but that man has some real input as a media person, as a son of a real CIA hack guy. And he really is a bit more astute than many people who are in the media. So I don't know if they did, but I gave him his contact information.
Great. I see a couple of hands up. Claudia, did you want to ask a question or comment on something? You're muted. Claudia? Okay, you can raise your hand again later if you still want to speak. Joan?
Yes, I was also one of the 5 people plus Gloria who were working on that. And one of the things that's been done is to use the post office method or the personal delivery by people in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia branch are now going to be helping with delivering the letters, but they've also been going by, post office special method to get a signature, and we've gotten some receipt notifications back. I'm not sure that Gloria mentioned that the major target for this was President-elect Donald John Trump. And so people should know that that is, and I think it was being sent to at least 3 places that were verified as places that might get delivered to him personally. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Putin.
And
You're also sending to Putin.
okay, that's
Yes.
important. Claudia, your hand is up again. Did you want to make a comment?
Yes, I'm sorry. I had trouble unmuting myself. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
And I like to be called by my middle name, Fatima, although I tell you what the rest of it is. But anyway, the question that I had was, I'm in New Orleans, and we just had that terror attack, which really has disturbed the peace. And I was just wondering if you all would be interested in an article as to what the national and international pressures are that caused this or contributed to this event, and what the response of our local community is feeling, because we're used to New Orleans to people getting killed, but we're not used to terrorist attacks, especially the way this one was carried out. And I think it's important to look at this, because a lot of people turn on their TV, they look at Gaza, they look at these other places, and they think it cannot happen here. And I think that what we got was a warning, and that warning that we got, I feel, should be shared with the world if you all are interested.
So if I may call you Fatima?
Yes.
That sounds like a very worthwhile article. I should just explain that normally articles are accepted only from issue committees and branches and board members or other chairs of national committees, but you're making a very persuasive case. So I will contact the new editor and let her know to expect that article, and then we'll have to see what it actually comes out to, but it sounds like a good one for the February eNews.
Thank you.
And that February eNews should come out right about February 1st. Now that we're into a new year, we're striving to get the eNewses out at the beginning of the month. Okay, Mary Beth was here at one time. Yes, you're still here, Mary Beth, and you're next to talk about your article.
Yeah, every year our Women, Money, and Democracy Committee meets for several hours in January, usually, to plan our goals and actions and where we want the committee to go over the next year. This year, that date will be on February 8th. It's a Saturday. And the first hour, we're inviting any WILF member to come. We'll do a listening forum, and we're asking WILF members to tell us what economic justice issues they feel are priorities for our committee to be targeting in the next year to 2 years. So the article had the registration link in it. It would just be an hour forum, and then our committee will continue to do its planning retreat in the next 2-3 hours after that, and we'll try to incorporate some of the suggestions that are made by the members. So that's it.
Thank you. Nancy Price is going to be next. She was the author of COP29, Building a Global Path to Renewable Energy, along with her co-author, Cindy Peister. So Nancy, you have a minute or two to tell us something supplemental to that if you wish.
Well, I think what's important to understand is that for a number of the years that this COP meeting has taken place, in the last 2 or 3, it's been in countries that were oil states, oil producing states, and the presidents were of the COP meetings were connected to the oil producing industries in those countries, and that there were a huge number of lobbyists from the oil, coal, and gas industries and corporations who were registered and attended. I think at COP28 there were something like 2,700 lobbyists. I think this time in Azerbaijan there were 1,700 registered lobbyists, and so and they really have a seat at the table. They have huge amounts of money where they can set themselves up and have enormous displays and banners and speakers and this, that, and the other thing. So for the countries that are so impacted by climate catastrophe and don't have the funds for mitigation, for rebuilding, for damages, they depend on the first world countries to set up funding. And and the funding is always lagging way behind millions and billions of dollars that's absolutely needed by these poorer countries affected by terrible storms, rising seas, floods, rains, etc. So that is really going to be the next focus on COP30, which will be held in Brazil. And we all know what's been happening in the Amazon. So the next COP is going to be very important. And we just have to get the money from the first world countries who are the producers of the carbon that's leading to the climate catastrophe. We really have to get the first world countries to put up the funds. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will mention that the next 2 authors, we had one article from Yasmin Roberson on the Domestic Prisoners of War Issue Committee work, but Yasmin wasn't able to be here tonight, but it's great to see the article from her. And we had another article about congratulations to Joan Robertson, who has been a supporter of WILPF. And unfortunately, Mary Hansen Harrison, who wrote that article, is also not able to be with us. But the next article came from our Boston branch with 2 authors, David Rothhauser and Eileen Krakowski. So I don't know, maybe I can give a minute to each of you. We could start with David.
Yes, thank you. This whole thing about my article, the title of it is Our War Against Children. And this didn't, the article is about children in Gaza, but the original story began in 1990 with a school shooting of children in Columbine. And I began speaking about it and writing about it because it hit me very hard that why would anyone want to kill school children who are the most vulnerable people in our society? They cannot defend themselves. And this went on, decade after decade, and the government gave very little coverage to it. The media gave almost no coverage to it. And this went on, and but my focus became more clear, and that I had to cover this in some way. And so Eileen and I got together, and we decided to make our focus the children in Gaza. but they're connected to the children in Columbine and all the other school shootings. And the connection is through the United States arms industry. The people who manufactured the weapons that were used to kill children in schools are the same people who manufacture the same weapons that are sold and sent to Israel to conduct the genocide against children and other people in Gaza. And so there's a distinct connection between what goes on with the arms industry here in America and what they're doing over in foreign policy in Israel. One question that comes to mind that many people ask is, why focus on children? And I say, because they are the easiest ones to forget. Let's face it, but without children in our future, and without children in the future of Gaza and Palestine, there is virtually no freedom of Palestine. Because what do you have when you have freedom and no children? And that's a question I read. Yeah,
So
anyway.
Time is up on that. So I hope, Eileen, that David represented the article very persuasively.
I just have to say that I wrote 2 articles. I barely touched. I just read David's wonderful article. I didn't edit it at all. My article was about my branch borrowing an idea in which people who are having an interesting speaker, like Joan Goddard did with San Jose, just share that and invite all the other issue committees. And mine happened to be with Hani Murad, the oldest of 12 kids who grew up. He is, by the way, Palestinian. He grew up in Jerusalem and worked for the UN and spent 15 years in Gaza until all the folks were kicked out. His family, as a matter of fact, were at in the West Bank throughout this time. And his wife wrote Ida in the Middle, one of the books that WILPF had acknowledged with an award. The second article that I wrote was just promoting the membership committee and asking, come on down, I'd love to have you on the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, coming to think of it, and I wrote this last night, I personally would love for people who would care to either be part of the committee on this or an adjunct subcommittee of the committee, use these articles as a talking point and call up some of the folks in the Jane Addams at Large group or other people who are close to renewing their membership. I'm not talking about fundraising. I'm just talking about connecting. Maybe 1 or 2 people per week, every week of the year. So I think that's what this eNews is really good for. Thank you.
So that's another excellent use for the eNews. And it's a good point that the eNews can be used effectively for a lot of different purposes. And finally, Grace Aaron wrote an article on non-lethal weapons, and you've been very patient, Grace. You get to have your time to talk about that article.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you all. You know, the articles, the other articles are very comprehensive and well written. I was very pleased. I was not sure if my article would be appropriate for WILPF, but you did publish it, which I think is great. Non-lethal weapons are still weapons, but personally, I feel that any attempt to lessen the harm of war is valid. I no longer feel that within any kind of reasonable future that war will be completely eliminated, especially in these horrible times. But there's hardly any discussion anywhere about non-lethal weapons, and they are available. The Pentagon had experimented with many large scale. We're not talking about the police type non-lethal weapons. We're talking about the large scale non-lethal weapons that can be used in a big military force, like an army situation. And so anyway, thank you all for being willing to publish it. And that's all I really have to say about it. And also for putting the footnotes, because I think the footnotes lend credibility to the article. That's all.
Thank you. So now we have about 15 up to 20 minutes for general questions or comments on any of the articles. So please raise your hand, preferably your Zoom hand, because then I'll see you as I almost see Michael, or raise your physical hand. Okay, so Michael, you're first.
Thank you all, and thank you. I hope we get an opportunity for people to hear from different authors more, or ask questions from the authors and connect, and so forth. I did want to respond to the last author, Grace. Just to share at the very end of your article, I talked about that whole part about like having the dialogue, because it kind of was one where it is questionable about, because of the force use. And I think the conversation, that I was actually hoping could maybe happen from that, I think this is important to share, is the idea, like, and Professor Chomsky makes this point, you can grab a kid's arm and pull them out of the street to avoid hitting a car. It's a use of force, but it's a justifiable use of force. And I think that, like, you have to justify any use of force. And I had, some conversations, even with WILPF members about this, because some of those non-lethal, weapons are, they are used domestically as well. They're piloted in war zones, and they can impact, hearing and vision and all these things. So I think the conversation, even like that's a part of what you're bringing up, because definitely we want to save lives, but I would think the conversation is even more than, I think where you're headed, this is the spirit, and I'd love to hear your comment, is the idea of the minimalistic use of force ever, whether it's domestic or in a war zone, and trying to find that line in a situation when something is to happen, like what happened in New Orleans, or what is justifiable use of force to save lives or prevent a situation or what have you. And I think that was the hope, because I did get some pushback about publishing that, and it could have, because it was a long eNews, and it might have been better to talk about it for maybe another month and shelf it, because it was such a long eNews. But does that align with what you're kind of we're talking about, Grace? I'm glad we have this opportunity. The idea of trying to capture that essence of what is the minimalistic use to achieve the end, to bring peace and stability.
Yes, I think that it would be helpful, in the general public sphere, to have a discussion about non-lethal weapons. The use of non-lethal weapons opens up a whole other panoply of options and of possibilities and of upsides and downsides. For instance, let's say use against an incoming army or force. You use aerosol sleep agents so that the combatants are simply put to sleep. And then you go in, you disarm them and capture them as captured soldiers. So now the thing is, if you don't kill them or maim them or have them run away, then you have to take custodianship over those soldiers. So you have to care for them. And what would that discussion look like? There's so many ramifications and so many uses of non-lethal weapons. So for instance, I'm sorry, I guess I'm going on too long, but I think it's a discussion that these weapons have existed. And I'm sure that the militaries of Russia and Israel and the United States and England and France and Italy and the rest of the world know about them. That's the thing. This has been kept undercover. And they're very powerful agents. So for instance, there are super lubricants. I think I might have mentioned this in the article. that can be sprayed on the road that makes it impossible for incoming vehicles to move. They just slush around on the road. So that's the kind of thing that could be used. And they've just been, we've kind of degraded back as a civilization to the Middle Ages. We're waging Middle Age wars of just killing people randomly, like horror movie style. And I don't know. It's between. I'm sure we're all appalled by the wars that are going on, and I just thought maybe it would be beneficial to open up a discussion about these things, even though it's not the direction that WILPF would go in, but have to think.
So thank you, Grace.
That's all. Sorry, going on.
I'm just trying to make sure everybody who wants to has a chance to
Sure,
comment.
sorry.
You raised some good points. Nancy had her hand up, but she took it down just when I was about to call on her. So we'll go on to Diane.
Okay, well, thank Grace. This was an interesting article, and I think that actually Disarm should actually talk about it at our next meeting. And I think that this is probably most applicable for police, even more than armies, perhaps. What do you think about that? Because all these people that are killed in our own country versus, I mean, the wars are really big. I mean, but these are, I'd like to see our police really think more about these. The vomit gun and stuff, think about that, those things instead. What do you think about police rather than wars with these?
Well, I don't see other hands up, so feel free, Grace, to respond.
Yeah.
But
I think that I think it's been used. Non-lethal weaponry has been used. There's been a lot of pushback about it because, of course, if a certain type of non-lethal approach to civil disorder creates injury, even if it prevents significant injury, it may create some sort of injury, and then there are lawsuits, et cetera, et cetera. So it's difficult to implement on a local level. But I think they have been. I might consider doing an article on the local use of non-lethal weapons because they've been used all over the place. Even tasers are a form of non-lethal, or there are fatalities from tasers, but it's better than shooting the person in the head. I guess. I don't know what you all think, but
Gloria has her hand up.
We have to look at the downsides, but also the upsides of these things.
Yeah, and I'll call your attention to the comment that Ellen put in the chat about non-lethal weapons are lethal in many cases. Gloria.
Yeah. Oh, I guess I lowered my hand by accident. Do you have a list, Grace, of what you mean by the term non-lethal weapons? Is there a list of the types of these things?
I think there is a list in my article.
So comprehensive.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they range from, completely non-lethal to some that have some sort of downsides. Just it's a gradient scale of non-lethal, completely non-lethal to somewhat lethal to lethal, I would say. Well, if they're non-lethal, they're not going to be just like lethal.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm not expressing myself well, but I think there's a gradient scale.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry, I didn't read the article yet, so I didn't know that was included.
Yeah, I think it's covered.
Grace, Grace, if you're not talking, I think the background noises are coming through.
I'm sorry.
That's the way it goes. Nancy.
Yeah, well, how about non-lethal, which would entail getting the parties together around a table and together trying to talk about peacemaking?
Well, that's not a weapon.
Well, it's right. It's not a weapon, but it's an alternative. And while we're talking about weapons, maybe we should also talk about alternatives. Speaking together has its challenges and etc. I mean, I think we have to talk about other ways of confronting each other in these circumstances and talking it through and coming to some peaceful solutions. Otherwise, we're really just dedicating ourselves to endless war, seems to me. But anyway, that came to my mind. Thank you.
Thank you. David, I think you're trying to raise your hand. Is that what you're indicating? You're muted. David, you're still muted. We can't hear you. So David, once you unmute, I'll call on you again. Right now, you can unmute and I'll call on Robin in the meanwhile. And Robin, you are muted.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Okay, so Robin, you'll be next. What did you want to say, David?
In regard to what was just said about an alternative to weapons, I had to, in my article that I wrote about that there is a glimmer of humanity, a challenge, an opportunity for the world to come out of this rubble of human tragedy. And I believe that one way to do it is to make an attempt, a very serious attempt, to communicate with the power brokers in our society. They're also called plutocrats. And these are the people behind the scenes with the most power in the world. They control the world. They make all the decisions that the governments follow and do not make on their own. The plutocrats do it. And there is a way to reach the plutocrats. They are available. You can reach them. You can talk to them. And take it from one of the articles that was written about Hamas at the Middle East peace table and why, by Barbara Taft and Ellen Rosser. And they mention a very a specific WILPF action plan, and it says, "We are dedicated to the concept that one must speak with our enemies in order to resolve conflicts." And I believe that's true. There is no resolution of conflict unless you come to a common ground with your enemies on some level. And so that's all. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you for that reference to that piece that was written quite a while ago, and it still has timely content. Robin.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. I was off for like half an hour because my sister-in-law called, and that's a rare occasion, so I had to talk with her. But what I want to bring up, what we are doing, have been doing, and how did this come about? Yes, we had a webinar with Alice Slater, and some of you know her through Disarm. She issues a frequent on the subject of nuclear weapons and so on. Anyway, we focused on the doomsday clock. Have you discussed that at all during this conversation? Did I miss anything? Okay.
No.
The doomsday clock, but you know about it, right? Is going to be moved either closer or further or stay in the same place from midnight. And it is now at 90 minutes from midnight. It's closer than it's ever been. And who knows what the Union of Concerned Scientists are going to do when they get together with their hats on the 28th of this month is the time that it will be moved. So our group, and it's involving Code Pink, Jody Evans, and folks from our Vermont Peace and Anti-War Coalition, said, well, doomsday is why are we just always looking at the worst? Let's create a peace day clock. And they got, this little group got going and developed a very beautiful picture of a clock. And Alice Slater wrote a whole article about, let's look at what we want to have happen instead of what we fear is happening or is going to happen. And it made me realize that the actual peace movement is not very strong at all. It's not, we're not out there proposing exactly what David was saying, that negotiation, I mean, you have enemies. The point is you have to talk to them unless you're going to go to war with them. And I just was on a long talk, a wonderful talk about Ukraine, and where did that come from? Mass action, peace action from Massachusetts, which I will put in the website. I think tomorrow it will be available, and talking about how at present the United States and England wants to keep the Ukraine war going because the idea is just to weaken Russia. And who cares how many people are going to be killed? That a number of opportunities were missed over. So to try to make the long story short, we're trying to develop a list of some of the positive things that can be proposed, and to do this around the time how we will actually interface with the doomsday clock. I'm not sure, and I've reached out to some of those people. Is anyone in touch with Rishi Guru Devan, who's a high school student who's started Students for Nuclear Disarmament? Anyone know him? Yet. Okay, well, anyway, we're trying to reach some young people. Michael, don't you know him?
Say the name one more time.
Yeah, Rishi, Rishi, and his last name is Guru Devan. Guru Devan. So he's of Indian descent. He goes to Phillips Exeter School in New Hampshire. So anyway, if please, I'll send stuff out about this, and if you have any thoughts about how to merge the Peace Day clock with the Doomsday clock, please please respond.
Thank you. An interesting idea. So
I just also to add to her, just a great MAPPA presentation by a Norwegian man, Glenn Dison.
Yes,
look at it. It's outstanding.
Yeah,
I saw you on it, Robin, and only a few of us were on it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have people with their hands up, so I want to
go ahead.
Please raise your hand if you want to speak. Michael, and then Diane, and then Gloria, and then Nancy.
There's
Michael.
the answer. Your kitty right there in front of you. That's the answer.
Nancy, Michael.
So this is going to be a very short. David, your article was very much about children and caring about children, and I appreciated that very much, as I'm a big stand for that as well. And if you look in the chat, David, and others, if you'd like to see, there was an article that was published by no accident on the 13th anniversary of Occupy Wall Street. It's called Fund Schools First, and because it advocates for 2 legislative solutions that raise over $500 billion. And there's actually a third that has to do with peace, just holding the Pentagon accountable. And if you just with the 2 pieces of legislation, it raises over $500 billion, the Wall Street speculation tax and the ultra millionaire billionaire tax. So that way public school in America can get the total amount 3 years of COVID funding. That's $122.8 billion. every year extra from the federal government, and that would only account for less than 24% of the revenues of those two pieces of legislation. And then with the Pentagon being held accountable simply to just spend the money that they're budgeted, if they just do that, that actually generates another $1.25 trillion in revenue. And then the total amount of COVID relief funding all 3 years equals 7% of those revenues. And that's one of the things. And then it actually profiles a community in Brockton, Massachusetts, where something insane is going on that made international news when the National Guard was called into the school that I teach at. And you know, the New York Post said we're the most dangerous high school in the country. And it's all just an attack on Black and brown folks, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, David, if you know, because I thought you would find that interesting, and maybe others, but it was about children, and you know, the idea of all children's lives matter, all children's educations matter, and all children's futures matter. So thank you kindly.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you all. I yield.
Thank you, Michael. And that's on the WILPF website. Diane, and please unmute. There you go.
I think it's so great to concentrate on peace rather than doomsday, but it is 90 seconds and not 90 minutes to midnight.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd clarify
Sorry.
that. Okay.
And that's in the chat. Ellen Barfield caught that one too. And it's from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. Okay, and Gloria.
Okay, sorry, I have it in the chat. I hate to keep bringing it up, but we do have a very funny 14-minute satire called Rock the Nuclear Clock with Shilpa Pandey and Margot Schulter, and I wrote it, and it's very funny, and you can have the link. And that can certainly be made known to peace groups, community radio stations. They may be looking for something that's themed. And this has a couple hundred viewers already. And I think that we should use the arts. And we should write funny plays, you know, like Dr. Strangelove is funny. This is sort of like that.
Thank you. Yes, humor gets through to people in a way that didacticism won't. Nancy.
Yes, so Alan Haber in Ann Arbor, Michigan has the peace table that he uses, and I think they put it out in their local park and table there and pass out literature. But don't forget that the US and Britain more or less scotched having peace negotiations before, or was it a couple of days after Russia's invasion? And then when the summit was organized in Vienna 2 summers ago, that became a very complicated event with venues being shut down after they'd been agreed to, and this, that, and the other. So this model of constant war and clashes versus somehow talking is, I mean, we're just way beyond where we need to be. And I think this contact you've made, Robin, is very important. Look what the youngsters have done, the young people have done around climate. So I can see young people picking up on the peace-making issue and making that another prominent campaign.
Thank you. And Grace, you're going to be the last one who gets to comment, because then we're going to move on to how to use social media with the eNews. But go ahead, Grace.
Okay, that's very quick. I think the old series, A Force More Powerful, which is a documentary series about successful nonviolent resistance efforts, was very, very powerful. I mean, it went into a little bit of disrepute after the Arab Spring failed, but not disrepute, but I think looking at those documentaries again and figuring out how to circulate that might be of benefit and open up conversations. That's all.
Thank you. So,
Darren, may I just, before we change, I don't have someone to buy, please.
Okay, really quick.
Just before we lose anybody who has to dash, if you all like this call, and I mean, it's nice to talk to the authors and, and be able to have these types of more casual conversations and such. I would just really invite and encourage each one of you to really have your voice be heard, at board meetings and within WILF and so forth. Because, as someone who's now worked with WILF for almost a decade, it is really amazing to me how challenging so much is to get done organizationally, the friction within the organization for all sorts of reasons. And good regular WILF members who are doing the work aren't always as represented as some of the louder voices that are obstructionist within the organization. And so if you like this stuff and this potential here for people to connect and have really good conversations of how we can coalition build, how we can outreach, how we can work together and take action on stories and all this, I think, this is a nice venue. And I, as someone who created with Mary Beth and led the way to like One WILF calls, now in hindsight, looking back and going, wow, why didn't we have this as a part of that too? Because it would have made so much sense. So, it's I think this is part of our like the best content that we produce. And I think even a biannual one of these we could do monthly for the eNews, but a special biannual for the Peace and Freedom, and to talk about that with authors. It makes sense to like celebrate the content that we're generating, the topics we're working on, the time, effort, and energy that we're investing into things with one another. Because I've just seen so often, this is land in the plane, that so many members, because we're busy people, don't even know what other members, other branches, other issue committees are doing. And they don't even read the other articles sometimes. So this is what's really nice about this, is to try to bring a light to it and get to see each other's faces and get to know each other more in a casual setting. Thank you so much. Many blessings to everybody and Happy New Year.
Thank you. And I'm just going to call on ET because she has a special place in WILF as a co-chair of Disarm, a member of the Communications Committee, and a member of the website committee. So go ahead, Ellen Thomas.
I just wanted to add to what Michael had to say about also utilizing our YouTube channel. We have a lot of really great stuff on there, and it's WILF US Today is what you look for, or just WILF US and then click on the dove. And browse through it, look at it, and the most recent videos are posted under the most recent playlist. Check out all of the playlists, and if you have any suggestions for additions to the playlists, that can be done by the people who manage the YouTube channel. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gloria, I'm going to ask you to hold your comment until after Michael gets to talk to us about social media. So, Michael.
Sure. Do you want to take it real quick? Because I just had that long share, so maybe it breaks up the hearing my voice.
No, I think we need to do that, and we'll come back to Gloria.
Sure. All right. So Nancy's still on here. Good. So Nancy made a great point about articles dovetailing into actionables and having actionables that are from sharing it on social media to engaging in the campaign in some way, whether it's engaging a legislator and all these things, whether it's joining a call maybe for that particular campaign and listing those things out. That is a really important thing for these articles that dovetails what I'm talking about here with social media, because we're trying to engage people and bring them in, right? So something that we, and through my experience of being the eNews editor, what I have come to realize is tremendously needed is a form. And with that form to submit each field and explain to people what we're asking for and the parameters, one of the things that I would want to add for people to recommend is to put a brief post of how you would like or what information you think is salient to put for text for a short social media post, be it on Facebook or Blue Sky. Now, with that, it's a general gist, because then someone like myself would take that and just kind of tweak it to make it as buzzworthy as possible for a call like this. That plus hashtags. So in addition to like WILPF or your committee hashtags, also looking at topical hashtags that are in line. And again, someone like myself would help you with that and work with, being able to have robust hashtags. So then on a future call, say in February, because the goal is to have the next eNews go out on February 1st. Say we had this call the first or second week of February, hypothetically, if it continues. The idea would be that we could be taking right from the jump, just like we did on the former Twitter storms many years ago, 2017 to 2019, before Twitter got corrupted. And we used to just share them out throughout the call. If we build that capacity, which could happen separately from these calls on trainings. So when people come on here, they're on here doing this, talking with authors. It's not a technical call with training, but the people who come on, it can be a community gathering celebration of sharing content at the same time. And it can be done really easily, because we can just post it on, say, for example, the WILPF Facebook. And then everybody just goes on the WILPF Facebook and just pastes the intro like we used to do, Ellen, remember? And then just share it. And I can teach people how to strategically join groups on Facebook that can help amplify our messaging to not just hundreds of thousands, but to truly, like millions of people. Like when I do a full blast, I'll get it out to the eyeballs because it's a brute force thing. I share it with over 150 highly populated, thriving Facebook groups, and it takes some time, but you can really amplify. That's just me. If there was like a half dozen or a dozen people doing that, that's a really big reach. And again goes back to what Nancy was saying. What are those actionables? So we're informing the public. We're driving content to our website and sharing about WILPF and sharing about the issues of peace and freedom that we're talking about. But if we have it embedded into like action level 1, action level 2, action level 3, like ways, share this post, join our call, contact your legislator, different actionables, thinking along those lines, and contact. This is who to contact if you want further information. This is all ways to spread our information, get it out there, and engage people into what we're asking them to do, and maybe even get people to become members as we invite them to become new members. And this is all going to be great because we have a new tool coming online, and it's the new website coming up in less than 2 weeks. So I'd be delighted to dovetail this call series with a training to teach people how to be able to do those kind of mechanisms of sharing on social media. The Twitter storms, it was a lot easier back then. Technology's they made it harder to do those things. So we don't have the ability to do it as clean as we used to. But if we kind of share the process on a call like this, we could post, a few hundred posts collectively, if not even more, throughout the call, where people are just going like click, click, kind of like stuff in envelopes. Click, 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 while you're talking and sharing casually, and we're really amplifying individual stories, Wilf's message, and the greater purpose of what our work is all about while engaging people. So thank you very much. I hope folks, we can talk more about that, and there can be trainings about that specifically as a sidebar that dovetails this, so we can preserve these calls to be about the authors, the content, and building a relationship. Thank you. Check.
Well, thank you, Michael. And I don't know if anyone wants to comment on the idea of actually doing social media posts during these meetings. We're at the point in the meeting when we have about 15 minutes left before we totally wrap up, and people are welcome to have sort of free-form conversation here. So you can raise your hand and be called on just so it doesn't get chaotic, but you can comment on anything that's come up in the course of today or that you think is relevant to WILPF. So anyone? Okay, Grace?
Yes, Michael, I think your ideas are really important and impressive. In terms of if a Zoom meeting with experts on how to market a message was made into a YouTube video, I think that would be very appealing to a lot of activists. In my long years as a peace activist, I put on many forums and demonstrations and events, and the one that got the most traction was many years ago. It was called Marketing Our Message. That had the most attendance, the most conversation about it afterwards. It was the most popular for years. So, I mean, it only happened once, but it was talked about for years afterwards. I think that's what people really need. Social media is now becoming toxic, and I'm sure you understand that, Michael. And we as activists need to know how to navigate social media so that we have a voice from us to the general public, to people who are of like mind and not of like mind. So any kind of informational video that we could put out under the WILPF banner, but meant for activists in all different spheres would be, I think that would get a lot of viewership and a lot of attention. I don't know if it exists already, Michael, but
I would, can I reply to that, Darian? Is that all right?
Sure.
So, Grace, one of the things I would tell you, yeah, there's some, I think Ellen's showing some how to use Facebook guides and such, and that's great. I think
and they're
that
from the WILPF US website, many of them. Well, they were.
Yeah, I think that the tactic that I'm talking about with going in and knowing the criteria for a particular group you'd like to join, and and then having like-minded, and I know you talked about like-minded and folks that weren't as, do we lose Greg? Oh, there she is. Sorry, you moved on the screen. So knowing what groups to join and how to target like-minded folks. And like you said, some groups you might want to target non-like-minded folks, but just knowing that some of those groups they have strict mandates on what can and can't be shared, or they'll boot you out or something. But the thing about recording that, and I'll just tell you, it is we would like our team, so to speak, the people who are good, to kind of be able to, and I don't mean to, but I'm saying, like, if someone has nefarious intent that supports, I think Lenny talked about, for example, racial colonial capitalism, for example, or something like of that ilk that they're supporting. We don't want them to get hip to some of these things, especially certain supporters of political ideologies that we oppose. But if we as a group do these trainings, and I'd be happy. I used to do these for WILPF. I used to do things like this for WILPF years ago.
I did want to just say that at the upcoming board meeting on January 25th, that's a Saturday, we'll be talking about the hiring of a new executive director and about the re-envisioning proposal for WILPF. So there's some very exciting material. And of course, we'll have the transition to the new co-presidents. And that e-alert should have gone out earlier today. There were some technical difficulties, but you probably will see the election results in your email box after this meeting. So anyone who's interested in that meeting, you can, and I'll put this in the chat, but you can send an email to secretary@wilpfus.org saying, please send me information about how to attend the board meeting. But of course, there are other ways also you can get involved, because each of the board members has a committee, and you can join those board level committees. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but I'm just trying to give people a range of options. And we're just about to wrap up here. Are there any further comments? And thank you to everyone who came tonight. It's great that we had a really very good turnout for this first eNews discussion, and we'll probably have others. I'll be proposing it to the new co-presidents. Yes, Grace.
I was just wondering if after you close the meeting, if we can chit chat a little bit afterwards. In other words, end the meeting, but those of us who want to chit chat can stay on.
Sure.
Is that possible?
Yes.
That was actually in the design of these calls, was to have the call stay open and to be able to have small group discussions and people hang back and build relationships. And because we just that's one of the things that people appreciated at the end of the One WILPF call series, when I used to be involved with program calls and also with the Twitter storms, is just time to get to know one another and talk, that we don't always have when you're in meetings that have pressing agendas and all these things to do. So it is really nice to be able to talk, and a lot of positive things come out of talking and building relationship, and
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you.
So before we close the meeting, does anyone else want to make a more formal comment in this somewhat informal part of discussion? Oh, seeing none, I will go ahead and put that secretary address in the chat, and I'll keep the meeting open and thank everyone for being here.